Hello, welcome to Ricoh's podcast series on information governance for lawyers. This is the third podcast of the series, Information Governance from the Field. I am Eric Parrish on Ricoh's information governance team for nearly 4 years, and I have 17 years working in the legal vertical. Today, I will be having a conversation with Kirsten McAvoy on records management and how it relates to legal and why lawyers should care about information governance. Kirsten, would you care to give a brief background on yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I am, as Eric mentioned, an information governance consultant here at Ricoh. I like to introduce myself as really like the passionate records manager that you never knew you needed. So when I talk to folks, I say, well, I've spent 22 years in this industry, primarily building records management programs from the ground up. I would say most of my career has been spent in a regulated environment. So if you think of like biotech, energy, nuclear, manufacturing industries, um, I think I've even put it in my LinkedIn profile that I'm a self-proclaimed records management guru. Um, so I'm happy to, share whatever experience I can with you about working with the legal folks during my career.
Excellent. So, in previous podcasts, Kirsten, we've discussed records and information management as a bedrock for a good legal experience, particularly as it relates to e-discovery. But more broadly, or with particularity, if you like, what has been your experience in working in a records department and collaborating with the legal department at organizations?
So I think it's important to point out that, records management and a good cornerstone for records management program and information governance program is, legal compliance. So we always talk about, the benefits of maintaining information for that right period of time, usually to meet like legal regulatory requirements, business requirements, and even like historical, uh, business archive, rationale. So I would say that my experience with legal is that truly they are, a key stakeholder within a records management program. I've had the experience of working in departments where my records management program reported right through the legal department, sometimes through product litigation, sometimes through even quality and regulatory. So I think each organization is going to be a little bit different. But yeah, like I said, I've had an opportunity to have my program report right up through general counsel. I think this is it's a great position to be in because general counsel has a lot at stake when it comes to an organization's information. Um, in addition, they have sort of that level of executive influence that you need to build a program, to sustain a program throughout an organization as well.
Excellent. And I've heard it stated, and I think I'm on board with the sentiment that having an executive sponsor is the most important aspect of an information governance program. Do you agree with that? And do you think that legal is uniquely positioned to be that executive sponsor? I think you kind of touched on that, but I guess I'm asking you to expand upon that point a bit there.
Sure. General counsel is just one of the executive sponsors that I think that you should have. I think it also is really dependent on the culture of the organization. Sometimes, even though we think that the legal department has a strong position in influencing the culture of an organization, it's not always the case. So I say that they should be one of the executive sponsors, but maybe it makes sense to also have perhaps somebody from IT, somebody from audit is another, potentially influential executive to have as well.
Excellent. Well, that makes sense then. And I guess when you're collaborating with legal, since they're at minimum a stakeholder, What questions or what concerns has legal historically had when coming to a records department? And then what questions or concerns that you think they should have moving forward to have a better experience collaborating with records and also defensively disposing of information and complying with the law and everything else that comes along with managing information in the legal department?
Sure. I think, like I said earlier, I've had um, the experience of having a records program that reported through the legal department, which was really helpful. I think in a variety of ways. I would lean on the legal department to provide insight on, you know, how long to keep certain pieces of information or certain data. Likewise, they could lean on me as the records manager to help point them in the right direction if they were looking for certain information, or if they wanted to know how long the organization is keeping certain record types or in which format. And I'd say that it's almost it's mutually beneficial when they realize that your records program typically has like a records coordinator network where from an e-discovery perspective or even a legal hold perspective, if they can tap into your records coordinators, they actually can find information faster. They can find perhaps additional custodians that they didn't even know existed within an organization. So sometimes again, it can be mutually beneficial. They help me in providing the guidance of how long to keep information. And I can also, provide the insight on where they can find the information if they need it for legal purposes.
Okay, excellent. And how often do you see attorneys or anybody from legal having conversations with records about defensible disposition and what that looks like and what's involved in that?
I think that it's always something that should happen when a retention or a records management program is developed or retention schedule is revised. There should be like a proactive interaction between the records manager and the appropriate attorney. Sometimes it's not just one attorney. Sometimes there'll be attorneys, responsible for litigation. There'll be attorneys responsible for, finance and tax and HR and things like that. So I think there should be regular communication with that. It really just depends on the organization's structure, and I'd say even their litigation portfolio would dictate how long, or excuse me, how often they interact.
Okay, excellent. And the reason I asked that question is that I've seen, and I'm curious about your experience here, a tension sometimes between disposition of data and legal's mindset that I've seen it where often they sort of want to keep everything forever and are missing sort of the advantages of having defensible disposition because then it would seem you have less information that needs to go into e-discovery. So have you seen that tension between records saying we need to get rid of things and legal saying no, we need to keep it all, we might need it? How does that dynamic play out?
I think that is probably like an age-old dynamic between records, between the business, between legal. Everybody wants to keep everything forever. It's hard to get rid of stuff. It's hard to not be a hoarder. Um, and I think that the challenge becomes when you don't have the information. It's like one of those things when I talk with folks and I say, okay, you want to keep your information forever, that's fine, but why? And when we really dig down to the why they want to keep it forever, it comes down to like a just in case, like just in case they need it, not necessarily because they're required to have it. So when I'm, working with folks and they say I want to keep it forever, and sometimes they're legal folks and sometimes they're business folks, but we really have to kind of work through the logistics of really how long is forever. And oftentimes it's not really forever, it's just like a long time. And then I think it really naturally progresses to, even if you were to say, okay, you can keep your information forever, but how are you going to find it? How are you going to store it? Who needs access to it? It kind of it grows from a record retention issue to like that broader information governance, liability and opportunity, we'll say.
Okay, excellent. That's the age-old problem. We're probably not going to solve that here in this podcast, but at least it's food for thought for driving things forward. What are some things that you think that legal could ask of records that would be helpful and are reasonable, so that if a legal department wanted to be proactive in engaging a records manager or records department, what are the first places that would be a good way to go to kind of foster collaboration and not maybe step on toes, if you see what I'm driving at there with that question?
Sure. I think that if you bring your records manager on board with, if you have like legal hold initiatives, rather than having like separate initiatives throughout an organization, if you can, align the energies, align the program so that, the records needs are being met while also legal hold and e-discovery challenges can also be, sort of minimized by leaning into one another. I think that's helpful. I think that legal is often brought into discussions with IT, with bringing new technology on board, that, just to kind of know that your legal department can lean into your records department, bring them to the table, ask them, about what requirements exist for managing information inside of technology, really just to kind of, bring everybody together so that they're not the afterthought. It's not just, retention and destroying information. It's, at the point of creating information or storing it or managing it, like bringing them along in the process.
Okay, excellent. And sort of shifting gears here, if we're looking at historically in your experience, what were the drivers for companies retaining records and information historically, and how is that changing moving forward? I know that we've touched on it a bit here in this conversation, but sort of trying to bring it to that point to kind of highlight it a little bit. The scope of change from the past that you've seen to moving forward, what does that look like?
So I don't know if the landscape has totally changed. Of course, like throughout my career, I'd say I grew up in a very highly regulated industry, professionally speaking. It doesn't get much more regulated from nuclear records, and so I think that if you are a compliance-driven organization, or you have those laws and regulatory requirements to keep information, then certainly, compliance and regulatory um, business drivers exist. What I'm seeing now, though, is that the business and the need to keep information longer for trending purposes and for future analysis and for making decisions for your business moving forward. I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Like we're moving away from, the minimum retention period to we're shifting to, what is the maximum amount of time that organizations can keep information without getting in trouble, without meeting those maximum retention periods, whether it's, for personal information, or, if you have international laws or regulations where you can't keep information for longer than, a certain period of time. I feel like we're just kind of we're moving to that longer period of time, not for compliance and business reasons, but more for the business needs and for future decision-making needs. Again, I think I briefly touched on it earlier when we were talking. Like, I find that a lot of folks are being inundated with information to the point where they are keeping information because they receive and they create so much information on a regular basis, they don't even have time to think about how long they're supposed to keep it. So I'm seeing more of that business need and that convenience driving the retention requirements.
So if I'm hearing you properly, Kirsten, you're saying we need to keep information for longer, But then that creates a problem. I think, as everybody knows, data volumes are growing exponentially. If we're keeping things longer, we're going to have even more data to potentially manage unless we have our data house in order. So are there technologies that can assist us here that would prove especially valuable? Because I can see how if it's all very manual, one can get overwhelmed very rapidly.
So I would say there are technologies that can help you do this, as far as, indexing the information wherever it is, just making sure that it's searchable and it's retrievable. But it's not just retrievable, it's also, being able to be exported and in a meaningful manner, both for the business and for the legal department. I think that it's a combination though. I think that folks need to understand what they're keeping, why they're keeping it, and then I think it's the business's responsibility to provide a structure and the direction for where information needs to be kept and how long it can be kept for. And then obviously, we don't have the IT rep here on the call today, but somebody from IT to say yes, and I can support the infrastructure to do this and provide the tools to search and export it if you guys need to in the future.
Great. So then, Kirsten, in wrapping up here, we're right at time. Are there any final thoughts, quick ideas that folks should keep in mind when working with legal or records?
I would say, for the legal folks to, look for the person in their organization or, group of folks that are managing the company's records. They actually know a lot more, and they're happy to share with you what they know. And likewise, I would say for your records folks that legal is not necessarily the enemy. That you can partner with them, and your programs will be stronger and more effective by doing so.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kirsten, for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you, listener, for joining us on our third podcast in the series on information governance for lawyers. If you found this interesting, we encourage you to listen to the other podcasts in the series that visit more specifically on other IG topics. If you think you might need help with IG or need to schedule an assessment, something broad-based or something small like file analysis, please feel free to reach out to myself or Kirsten. Our contact information is in the page where you clicked on this podcast.